الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على الأتمان الأكملان على خاتم النبيين وسيد المرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. اللهم اغفر لنا وارحمنا وعافنا واعف عنا. قال الشيخ اللالكائي رحمه الله تعالى. We'll continue with reading from the book known as شرح أصول اعتقاد أهل السنة والجماعة, the explanation of the fundamentals of the Aqidah of Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah, Li Abil Qasim Hibatullah al-Lalaka'i rahimahullah ta'ala, who died in the year 418 after the Hijrah. And the author had previously explained the foolishness of the people of innovation, those who turn away from the usul of Ahl Sunnah, the Kitab, the Sunnah, the way of the Sahaba, the consensus, the holding fast upon that until death, and the avoiding of people of innovation and the not listening to their desires. He mentioned the foolishness of the people who turn away from those principles and what that foolishness leads them to from backwards thinking, and how they criticize the people of the Sunnah in ways that they are more deserving to be criticized. So they criticize the people of the Sunnah with blind following and with nothing more than gathering of statements. And this is in spite of the fact that they've never taken this time to learn and study the religion, to travel in its path, and they don't know the legislation of Islam. They don't know a hadith, and this is a point that always deserves to be reiterated. And that is when we ask ourselves, why do the people of innovation fall into innovation? And when we ask ourselves, how do we protect ourselves from being like so many individuals who we see from the Muslims, unfortunately, who their methodology and their aqidah and their implementation of Islam is so inaccurate? How do we get Islam established in our communities the way that we saw Islam established in the previous communities? How can the Muslims today, especially here in the West, reach a level of Islam and firmness in Islam the way the Muslims previously in the East had reached? And the answer to all of this is knowledge, or on the contrary, turning away from it and not actually giving it its just due. So when we look at the people of innovation, what led them to fall into innovation? More often than not, if not always, it was their turning away from acquiring knowledge. Their ignorance of the religion led them to believe that the religion was deficient, led them to believe that the religion was missing something, led them to believe that they needed to find the answers, even if their desire was to support the religion. Their lack of knowledge of the religion led them to seek a means of supporting the religion in other than what was legislated. And because the acquisition of knowledge is something that requires effort and steadfastness and tul al-nafs, it's long and it's laborious or laborious at sometimes, they find themselves not being patient with it. And you see in this the simplicity of the advice of Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab rahimahullah ta'ala and his Thalathat al-Usul, and how he started off with the things that every Muslim needs to be aware of, and that is knowledge and action and calling to it and patience upon it all. That patience is something that's necessary as it relates to knowledge. So the people of innovation, they didn't have the patience to acquire knowledge. And that is the main cause of what caused them, or what led to their deviation. And when we want to look and compare with the Islam of the Salaf, the thing that distinguished them was their knowledge. And that knowledge that is beneficial knowledge that leads to action and implementation. And that's why you find that even during the time of the Sahaba, the Muslims who apostated after the death of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the thing that was one of the major causes in their apostation or their apostasy was their lack of the prophetic education in Tarbiyah, the lack of knowledge and Islamic upbringing that they had, that the Sahaba who were raised by the Prophet in Mecca and Medina experienced. So you found those Sahaba being steadfast more so after the Prophet's death, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, than those who had newly converted to Islam. And then alhamdulillah ta'ala, who guided, those of them back to their rushd, to their proper guidance after that, and to where their Islam became strong. And then you see in the tabi'een and the atba' tabi'een, that which is astonishing, how the Muslims could go from one location to an unknown land, open it, be successful in that land, establish Islam, and then the people in that land would turn around the next day and go and fight on behalf of the Muslims in other lands. And there's no, need for a greater example of this than the Muslims in Northern Africa. And it's not something that we should understand as it relates to color and things like that. But the Muslims in Northern Africa, as the Muslims passed through Egypt and opened Egypt and Libya and Tunis, and eventually spreading to the Islamic West of Algeria and Morocco, and eventually reaching to Spain. When we ask ourselves, who are the Muslims who entered and conquered Spain, a land that the Muslims had never been to before, and a land that they did not know anything about, and they conquered it in such a small amount of time, 1 or 2 years from entering into it in the year 92 after Hijrah until, dominating it by the year 96, if not 94. The Muslims who entered were not of Arab origin. They were new converts to Islam who had accepted Islam in their lifetime and then went and established Islamic Spain. So you talk about Tariq ibn Ziyad, and you talk about Musa bin Nasr, and people like this, how they weren't Arab. They were, from the Berber. They were from the Muslims that accepted Islam from the North African area. SubhanAllah. So in any circumstance, the point of it is that knowledge is what led to that stability. Those new converts who accepted Islam on the hands of the Sahaba, you find that their Islam was strong because of what the Sahaba instilled in them from knowledge and clear evidence. While when you look at, unfortunately, some of us nowadays, when we accept Islam, the Islam that we're not presented the Islam that is calling to Tawheed, the Islam that is calling to the Sunnah, the Islam that is calling to the way of the Salaf from the Sahaba, the previous generations of the Muslims. You find us accepting Islam on other pathways, and this is what leads to that instability in our Islam sometimes. And the only way to combat that in ourselves and in our communities, when we complain about how, sometimes, like, for example, me being African American, the African American community, you find them not having a strong foothold in Islam sometimes. You find them being shaky in their Islam sometimes, and how often other than Islam enters into Islam, whether it be nationalism, whether it be financial issues, whether it be the issues that plague our communities from drugs and violence, etc. The remedy of that is the knowledge that Islam comes with when it mixes with the heart and shows up on the limbs. This is what makes our Islam firm? And obviously there's a lot of conversation we could have about that, which now is not the place directly. But the point is that the author talked about that the people who abandoned the fundamentals of Islam, the reason they abandoned them was because they're turning away from knowledge, and from their foolishness is that they accuse the people of the Sunnah with that which they were more deserving of being accused of ignorance and blind following, etc. Now the author is going to talk about some of the other things that their ignorance led them to. So they're turning away to the Sunnah, and their ignorance and their lack of effort into learning the religion caused them to attack the Muslims and their acquisition of knowledge and implementation of knowledge, and in their piety and in their righteousness. They caused them to belittle the Muslims and to attack the Muslims and who are upon the Sunnah in their adalah, in their religion. And that attack of the Muslims in their religion that the people who turned away from the fundamentals did based on their ignorance, what is the natural progression when you start criticizing the Muslims? And this is an important lesson for us. As the Prophet ﷺ, whoever says that the people are destroyed, then he is the one who has destroyed them, or he is the one who is the most destroyed of them. What is the natural progression when you become abundant in criticizing the Muslims? Everybody's ignorant. Everybody's ignorant. Everybody's innovating. Everybody's this. Everybody's that. The natural progression is that you start to see them as non-Muslims. And this is what happened with the people of innovation. They were, after their criticism of the people of the Sunnah and the general Muslim population for not being on their innovation, that led them to deeming the Muslims as non-Muslims. And this is a common quality amongst the people of innovation. The people of innovation, from their fundamentals that are normal amongst them, is that they deem their opposers as non-Muslims. They deem those who go against them as heretics, kafirs, deviants, outside of the religion. And this is not to be confused with the people of the Sunnah do, because yes, the people of the Sunnah call a kafir a kafir. And yes, the people of the Sunnah warn against innovation. And yes, the people of the Sunnah call an innovator an innovator. But the difference is that the people of the Sunnah are very reserved in how they do that. And they're very careful in how they do that. Because they understand that the Prophet ﷺ, he said, whoever says to his Muslim brother, ya kafir, faqad ba'a bihi ahaduhuma. Whoever says to their Muslim brother, O kafir, then one of them is more deserving of it. Or one of them has adopted. One of them, it is applicable to one of them. And so the Muslim upon the Sunnah, the Salafi, he guards his tongue. And he's cautious. Because he knows that levying accusations and speaking against the honor of a Muslim is impermissible. Inna dima'akum wa amwalakum wa a'radakum بينكم حرام كحرمة يومكم هذا في بلدكم في شهركم هذا في بلدكم هذا. The Prophet ﷺ, he said, indeed, your lives and your wealth and your honor is haram amongst yourselves. So the Muslim, even when he criticizes the person of innovation, he is conscious in his mind that he is not going past what needs to be criticized for the protection of the religion. And he doesn't mix into his criticism of the innovator anything personal. And he understands that when somebody errs or makes a mistake, that sometimes the error can be a mistake that doesn't necessitate wickedness. And sometimes it can be a sin. And sometimes it can be wickedness that isn't innovation. And sometimes it can be innovation that isn't kufr. And sometimes it can be kufr. But they are careful and they only apply these titles and these realities with knowledge and when necessary. As opposed to the people of innovation who are quick and they're quick on the draw. They're very loose-lipped and sharp-tongued against their rivals and opponents. If you disagree with them, automatically a non-Muslim. And so this is what the author is going to talk about now in this next paragraph. He says, ثُمَّ تَكْفِيرُهُ لِلْمُسْلِمِينَ بِقَوْلِ هَؤُلَاءِ. Then you find them, i.e. the innovators who have abandoned the fundamentals of the Sunnah, deeming the non-Muslims as kuffar, deeming the non-Muslims as disbelievers based off the statements of these people. What he means by these people are those people that he referenced from the philosophers that the innovators have attached their religion to blindly. When we talk about how our leaders are the messenger, the Sahaba, the Qurun al-Mufaddala, as opposed to the people of innovation, their leaders are those Safala and those low people who have come later or who were before from the Mutafalsifa, from the people of philosophy, or those who adopted their way. Not only do you see them blindly following those people in their religion, they deem other people to be non-Muslims based on the statements of these individuals. So if somebody goes against Akhtal, if somebody goes against Al-Allaf, if somebody goes against Al-Jubba'i, you find that their followers say, well, this person has no reality, that has no surety in their religion. And this person is upon disbelief because they don't know their religion. And so like this, the author is saying, you find them after what we've already mentioned in the last lesson, also deeming the Muslims to be non-believers based on the statements of these people. He says, إِذْ لَا حُجَّةَ عِنْدَهُمْ بِتَكْفِيرِ الْأُمَّةِ إِلَّا مُخَالَفَتُهُمْ قَوْلُهُمْ مِنْ غَيْرِ أَنْ يَتَبَيَّنَ لَهُمْ خَطُؤُهُمْ فِي كِتَابٍ أَوْ سُنَّةٍ. He says, and this is because they have no evidence in deeming the Muslim Ummah as disbelievers other than the fact that they have opposed the statements of these people without there being any clarity indicating their mistake found in the book or the Sunnah. What he's saying here is that these innovators deem the Muslims to be disbelievers. The innovators, they deem the Muslims to be disbelievers, solely based on the statements of the other innovators or non-believers that they have adopted as their leaders in the religion. And this is because they have no evidence besides the statements of these people to use as a proof of the disbelief of the Muslims. The only evidence they have in deeming the Muslim Ummah as disbelievers is the fact that they go against the statements of their leaders. And there is nothing clear in the Quran regarding the quote-unquote mistake of the Muslims, nor is there anything clear regarding their mistake in the Sunnah. And it shows us from our methodology how we act. We only deem a kafir if he has been deemed a kafir by the book and the Sunnah. We only deem an innovator if he has been deemed an innovator by the book and the Sunnah. We only deem a wicked person a fasiq if he has been deemed a fasiq according to what's in the book and the Sunnah. And likewise, to the contrary, we only praise an individual to the extent that they deserve the praise based on their adherence to the book and the Sunnah. So we love for Allah and we hate for Allah. And we know the people based on the truth. And we don't base the truth off of what we think about the people. So we judge the people based on the truth. And we don't judge the truth based off of the people. And so the innovator, they judge the people and they judge the truth based off of the people that they follow and those that they've adopted their belief system and methodology. He goes on to expound on that. He says, وَإِنَّمَا وَجْهُ خَطَئِهِمْ عِنْدَهُمْ إِعْرَاضُهُمْ عَنْ مَا نَصَبُوا مِنْ آرَائِهِمْ لِنُصْرَةِ جَدْلِهِمْ. He says, and indeed the only mistake, quote unquote, that these people, i.e. the Muslims, have made in their view, the only mistake that has caused them to deem them to be disbelievers, is their turning away, i.e. the Muslims, turning away from that which the innovators have erected from their false opinions to support their arguments. What made the Muslims a kafir in the eyes of the deviant? What made the Muslim a kafir in the eyes of the deviant is that the Muslim turns away from the false ideologies, the false methodologies that the innovator erects to support his argument. The innovator comes up with ideas and concepts and says, this is how you need to understand the religion. But the Muslim with knowledge upon the Quran and the Sunnah, or even the common Muslim, generally speaking, you'll find them turning away from these falsified ideologies and ideas. You don't find them supporting them. If you ask any common person, is Allah everywhere? They'll tell you no. They'll say Allah is above his creation. And this is something that is ingrained in them. And they would find it to be heresy to say, for example, Allah is in my pocket or inside of my mouth, let alone, wa'iyadhu billah, places more disgraceful than that. And the deviant, the innovator, you find him making these statements. Allah is everywhere. Allah is inside of everything. And what was the disbelief of the Christians if not thinking that Allah was inside of Jesus? And if Allah was everywhere, wouldn't that necessitate that Allah was inside of Jesus and that the ideology of the Christians might be accurate? But you see that the innovator, they're foolish and short-sighted in their arguments. And because they come up with these ideas that they erect, they're forced to adopt falsehoods. And then when the Muslims turn away from these ideas, because the innovators' religion was based on them, and it wasn't based on the Quran and the Sunnah, they feel attacked in themselves. And the innovator feels that the only true religion is the religion based on the arguments that they have established. And so they feel they have to defend themselves that they are right in spite of what their false arguments lead to from falsehood. And trying to establish that they are right, they have to say that the Muslims are wrong. And they have to deem the Muslims to be disbelievers to support their arguments. Ibn al-Lalaka'i rahimahullah ta'ala, he goes on to say about what their evidence and their proof is. He says that they have no other mistake other than that they have turned away from that which, i.e. the innovators, have erected from ideas or false ideas to support their arguments. And they say that the Muslims have left following their statements and that which they have deemed good in the support of their madhabs, in the support of their ways of thought. Meaning they say that the Muslims, they don't follow our statements, and this is why they're kafirs. And they don't follow what we have deemed it a good argument and a good point to support our ideologies, and this is why they're kafirs. So you see that the person of innovation, their friendship and their enmity is based solely on, are you with us or against us? And anybody who has experienced them, they know this to be the truth. Their friendship is only in, are you with us or against us? While the friendship and the enmity of the people of the Sunnah is based upon, are you on the Sunnah or not? And even with the people that things arise amongst them naturally as human beings in disagreements, you find them still supporting their brother because their brother is on the Sunnah. So how sad is it when we see the people of the Sunnah arguing with each other, fighting each other, not over the religion most of the time, even if they claim and believe that that's what they're doing, but they're fighting each other over hudud al-nafs, over self or over personal issues. And they cloak it in the guise of religion, or maybe they don't even recognize and they believe it's something religious, but there is a Salafi against a Salafi arguing and fighting, and both of them staying away from each other over matters that don't require such hostility. And this is why it's important for the Muslim to know these fundamentals. The people of the Sunnah, we don't show friendship and enmity based off of whose side you're on. If you agree with me or disagree with me, if you follow Sheikh so-and-so or Sheikh so-and-so, our friendship and our enmity is based on adherence to the book and the Sunnah. And there are too many examples of this. Your brother doesn't eat dhabiha, and you eat dhabiha. It doesn't necessitate you kicking him off the religion. It doesn't necessitate you arguing. He has a different opinion than you. Your brother follows Sheikh so-and-so in this issue while you follow Sheikh so-and-so in this issue, and both of them are mashayikh. Both of them are scholars. Both of them are Salafi. It doesn't require separation. But the people of innovation are the ones who their friendship is solely based on, are you with us? Do you say what we say? Do you follow our opinions that we have deemed valid in the support of our madhab? And their enemy is to everybody. And this is why it's important for the Salafi, regardless of quote unquote what side of the issue you're on, whether you're with Sheikh so-and-so or Sheikh so-and-so, that you do not transgress the bounds as it relates to your Salafi brother. That you do not transgress the bounds as it relates to your criticism. Yes, you can point out faults. You can point out error. You can speak the truth. And you can transmit the statement of the scholar that you believe to be the haqq. But iyak, that lets you defame your Salafi brother and remove him and be an enemy to him for no other reason than he disagrees with you. Especially when you see him trying to hold fast to the Sunnah. And unfortunately, this is all too often this day. وَإِلَى اللَّهِ الْمُشْتَكَى. And to Allah is the complaint. In any circumstance, Al-Lalakai is saying that this is what the innovator does. They deem the others to be disbelievers based on their abandoning, based on the abandoning of the Muslims following their statements, based on the fact that the Muslims don't follow their statements and that which they have deemed good from their methodologies. Allah he goes on to say, فَهُوَ كَمَا قَالَ اللَّهُ وَمِنَ النَّاسِ مَنْ يُجَادِلُ فِي اللَّهِ بِغَيْرِ عِلْمٍ وَلَا هُدًى وَلَا كِتَابٍ مُنِيرٍ ثاني عطفه ليضل عن سبيل الله له في الدنيا خزي ونذيقه يوم القيامة عذاب الحريق. He says, and this is as Allah Azza wa Jal has said, and from the people are those who argue about Allah. This is what the people of innovation do. They argue about Allah. Everything is argumentation in the deen. They argue about Allah, but what's their main quality? بِغَيْرِ عِلْمٍ. They argue about Allah without knowledge. They didn't acquire it in the beginning. They didn't use it to establish their evidence, their arguments, and they don't gain it from their sources. They argue about Allah. They argue about the religion without knowledge. Wallahi, ya Salafi. Because our kalam, although it's directed to all, it's for us to benefit from the most. Hudan lil-muttaqeen. It's a guidance to those who have taqwa. Iyaka ya salafi. That you be one without knowledge. That you be from those who parrot things that have been said without you knowing them. Ta'allam ya akhi. Learn the religion. Put that effort into it. Get your feet dirty. Go sit with the mashayikh. Go learn the Arabic and put yourself in the positions to be a benefit for yourself and for your community. But as far as that, we just sit at home and we don't put in effort and we don't learn, and then we just say what we heard, then this is something that we fear that there is a resemblance to the people of innovation in. And we understand the criticism that gets levied against some of us sometimes when they say that amongst us are those who have the qualities of the Hizbiyah. Not because our brothers are Hizbis, wa'iyadhu billah. Our brothers, inshallah, they're Salafi. And the majority of them want good. And the majority of them are doing things as they see it to be the truth. But the dividing line is knowledge. And it has to be acquired. Because if it's not acquired, then from the people are those who argue about Allah without knowledge. وَمِنَ النَّاسِ مَنْ يُجَادِلُ فِي اللَّهِ بِغَيْرِ عِلْمٍ وَلَا هُدًى وَلَا كِتَابٍ مُنِيرٍ. They argue about Allah without knowledge and without any guidance and without any book that brings enlightenment, without any enlightened book or illuminating book. They don't have any source to support what they're saying except so-and-so said it. لا علم ولا هدى ولا كتاب منير ثاني عطفه. He turns his neck up, right? ليضل عن سبيل الله. In order that he can misguide away from the path of Allah. له في الدنيا خزي. For him in this life is a disgrace. وله في الآخرة عذاب حريق. ذلك بما قدمت يداه. وإن الله ليس بظلام للعبيد. Right? He has in this life a disgrace, and in the hereafter he will have a burning punishment. Allah continues in this ayah, the author doesn't mention. He says, ذلك بما قدمت يداه. That's because of what his own hands have sent forth. And Allah doesn't oppress the slaves. So it's upon us to exemplify the qualities of Ahl Sunnah and not be like the people of innovation. Our Shaykh Nuristani, Hafidhahullah Ta'ala, he said, in explaining this passage when we were doing this book with him, he said, Ahl Sunnah, Ahl al-Bid'ah, yukaffiruna kullu man laysa ma'ahum. The people of innovation, they deem as deviants everybody who's not with them. وأهل السنة لا يكفرون إلا بما يقتضي ذلك من الكتاب والسنة ومفهوم كلام السلف. He says, as for Ahl Sunnah, then they only deem as disbelievers those that it has been deemed as such against them by the book, the Sunnah, and the understandings of the Salaf. To conclude, we'll read another paragraph. The author, he says, ثم ما قذفوا به المسلمين من التقليد والحشو لو كشف لهم عن حقيقة مذاهبهم كانت أصولهم المظلمة وآراؤهم المحدثة وأقاويلهم المنكرة كانت بالتقليد أليق وبمن تحلوها من الحشو أقلق إذ لا إسناد له في تمذهبه إلى شرع سابق ولا استناد لما يزعمه إلى قول سلف الأمة باتفاق المخالف والموافق باتفاق مخالف أو موافق. آسف. He says, ثم ما قذفوا به المسلمين من تقليد. Then, in addition to all of this, they turned away from the religion. They didn't learn it. They were ignorant. They attacked the Muslims in their sources, and they accused the Muslims in the veracity of their religion and in the strength of their religion. And they adopted the statements of ignorant peoples as their leaders. And then they, based off of these statements, deemed the Muslims to be disbelievers because of the statements of these individuals. And they called the people on the Sunnah Hashawiyya, people who just grab statements, and Muqallida, and people who are blind following. The author, he says, ثُمَّ مَا قَذَفُوا بِهِ الْمُسْلِمِينَ, that which they accused the Muslims of regarding blind following and a simple gathering of statements, لَوْ كُشِفَ لَهُمْ عَنْ حَقِيقَةِ مَذَاهِبِهِمْ, if it was uncovered for them or unveiled for them the reality of their madhabs, if somebody could just get them to see the reality of what they do, كانت أصولهم المظلمة, the fundamentals that they base their religion upon, cause darkness. Or if somebody can get them to see the reality of their madhahib, the reality of their methodology, and get them to see the reality of their fundamentals that cause darkness, and get them to see the reality of their opinions that are innovated and their statements that are disapproved of, they would have recognized that they had more right to be called blind followers. Wallahi, ya ikhwan, and everybody, just pay attention to these people when they talk. See their books and their introductions. How much is Allah said, the Messenger said, the Sahaba said? The statement of the Salafi, the statement of Ahl Sunnah is always based on knowledge. It's always based on evidence. But when you hear them, all of their statements are so-and-so said, so-and-so said. And if you look at what so-and-so said, Al-Razi said, Al-Ghazali said, Al-Jawaini said, etc., etc. But it's never Allah and His Messenger said. Who is the blind follower, us or them? We're following the light from Allah. يُخْرِجُ النَّاسِ مِنَ الظُّلُمَاتِ إِلَى النُّورِ. And they're following the statements of these individuals. يُخْرِجُ النَّاسُ مِنَ النُّورِ إِلَى الظُّلُمَاتِ. Our statements take the people out of darkness into the light. Their statements take the people out of the light into the darkness. Who is the blind follower? Their opinions are innovated. Their ideas are newly manufactured. They didn't exist with the Prophet ﷺ. It didn't exist with the Sahaba. That's why all of them are attributed to something other than the book and the Sunnah. Al-Mu'tazila, Al-Jahmiya, Al-Ash'ariya, Al-Maturidiyya, Al-Kullabiyya, Al-Sufiyya, Al-Shi'iyya. All of them have attributions that are to individuals, names of people who started their groups, right? And their ideas that they innovated. While the Salafi are the word actually means those who go back in the old. Ahl Sunnah, the people of the Sunnah, their group. Al-Firqatul Naji, like the Prophet said. Al-Ta'ifatul Mansura, right? Their statements are the innovated ones. So who's the blind follower? Who doesn't have evidence? Who's just gathering up statements of people without any light and without any insight? Their statements are the things that are despicable, that are deemed ungood. Listen to the things that they say. Allah is not above. Allah is everywhere. Allah doesn't have qualities. He doesn't have attributes. Allah, you can't describe Him with knowledge. Allah is not merciful. Allah is not forgiving. Allah doesn't love. Allah doesn't hate. These are the things that they say. What kind of ilah is this? Or on the other end of the spectrum, Allah is everywhere. Allah is me. Allah is inside of the toilet. Allah, ya'adhu billah. This is what their innovation leads to. Ali is Allah. Jibril got drunk. Ya'adhu billah. What kind of religion is this? Eat the poo of your teacher. Let him throw feces at you. Prostrate to him. What kind of religion is this? These statements that they say are despicable. What do we say? Follow the Quran. Follow the Sunnah. Ya akhi. Make things easy on yourself. Follow the light that Allah set down. Ittaqillah. Have the fear of Allah. Act according to the obedience of Allah upon a light from Allah, hopeful for His reward. And avoid the prohibitions of Allah upon a light from Allah, fearful for His punishment. Now, excuse me. He says they would have understood that they were more suitable to be deemed as blind followers, and that which they have adopted, or that which they have taken on as their religion, was more accurately considered just a gathering of statements of individuals without any insight and reality, just gathering up of hashu, and just to gather people's statements. He says, إِذْ لَا إِسْنَادَ لَهُ فِي تَمَذْهُبِهِ إِلَى شَرِيعَةٍ, since their methodologies have no basis upon any previous legislation. Not only is the innovator not affiliated to Islam, you find them not affiliated to anything. They're not even following Judaism or Christianity half the time. It's only what they desire and what they've invented. So they have no basis for their methodology other than they have no basis for their methodology in any previous legislation. Nor do they base their claims, or nor do they attribute their claims to any statement of a salaf from this ummah. And this is according to the agreement of those who support and go against. You don't have to take just the Salafis' word for it that they have no basis. They themselves tell you we don't listen to the Salaf. يا أخي كلام السلفي أحوط أسلم وكلام الخلفي أعلم وأحكم. The statement of the Salaf, it was a safe statement. They were ignorant people. They didn't know. You'll find them even saying that their leaders are better than the Prophet. The Sufiya, from them are those that say that the awliya are better than the Prophet. They know the reality of the religion more than the Prophet. The Mutafalsifa, they say that their hukama are more knowledgeable than the Prophet, some of them, because they say the Prophet didn't know the realities of what he was telling the people, and it was only for the common masses. The Shia, they say that the Imma, some of them are those who put them above the prophets, and that they control the universe and they dictate things. So not only do we say they have no basis on who they affiliate to from the Salaf, they say it themselves. The Mu'tazila, why are they called the Mu'tazila? Because they abandoned the Salaf, right? And they came up with al-manzila bayna manzilatayn, the place in between the two places. The Khawarij, the Prophet asked their originator, maybe you think you're better than all the people here, don't you? He said, of course I do. Right? Qawmun tahqiruna salatukum ila salati. You deem little your recitation compared to their recitation. They think they're better. They don't need the Salaf. They don't need Abu Bakr. They don't need Umar. They don't need Uthman, Ali, the Sahaba. It's not us who says that about them. It's them who says it about them. And then you find from the Muslim who claims love for Allah and His Messenger, those who follow them willingly. In spite of the fact that the Prophet ﷺ, he said love of the Ansar is a sign of a believer, and hate of the Ansar is a sign of a munafiq. And likewise about his family and all of the Sahaba in general. Allah made us follow them. وَإِذَا قِيلَ لَهُمْ آمِنُوا كَمَا آمَنَ النَّاسِ قَالُوا أَنُؤْمِنُوا كَمَا آمَنَ السُّفَهَاءُ. When it said to them, believe as the people believe, they say, shall we believe as the fools believe? They consider us, the people of the Sunnah, and those who we follow from the Prophet and the Salaf, from the Sahaba, the Tabi'een, the Atba' Tabi'een, and the leaders of Islam, they consider them the fools. And it's not us who says that they say that. It is them who say that they say that. Why would a Muslim follow them? Why would a Muslim adopt their way? Instead, O Muslim, upon you is the usul that the aqidah of Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah is based upon. Kitab Allah, Sunnati Rasulillah, the way of the Sahaba, the consensus of the Muslims, holding fast to those things until death, avoiding the people of innovation, and not listening to their statements. This is what this book is about. We'll stop at that amount. هذا وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على عبده ورسوله نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أستغفره وأتوب إليه.